Trump threatens Canada again. Could he really annex America's northern neighbor? Would Canada ever agree to join the U.S.? Or would Trump use force to make it happen? What would war with Canada mean for America? And what does this mean for preppers? Welcome to Preppers News from Preppers Paradigm. News and global events with a prepper's perspective. I use a computer-generated voice because my own is difficult to understand due to an injury. Donald Trump has once again suggested that Canada should become part of the United States, calling it an artificially divided country and saying it would be one of our greatest states. But what if this wasn't just political rhetoric? If Trump actually tried to annex Canada, how would it play out? Could it happen through diplomacy? Or would it come down to force? In this video, we'll explore the possibilities, the roadblocks, and what it would mean for preppers if tensions between the U.S. and Canada escalated. Donald Trump's comments about Canada go beyond trade disputes or border policies. He's openly suggested that Canada should become a U.S. state. For example, in a recent press conference, he claimed that the U.S. is spending $200 billion a year to subsidize Canada, stating that America doesn't actually need anything Canada provides, whether it's cars, lumber, or energy. He went on to say that Canada only functions because of U.S. support, and that it only works as a state. Trump even described the U.S. Canada border as an artificial line drawn through the continent and said Canada would be one of our greatest states. He suggested that Canadians could keep their national anthem, but under the U.S. flag. This isn't the first time Trump has made statements like this. But what stands out is the implication that if diplomacy doesn't work, other options are on the table. If Trump tried to bring Canada into the U.S. through diplomacy, what would it take? For Canada to legally become part of the United States, the process would be incredibly complicated. First, the Canadian government would have to agree, which is highly unlikely. No major political party in Canada supports annexation, and most Canadian leaders view the idea as completely unrealistic. Even if the government somehow entertained the idea, it would still need approval from the Canadian people. That would mean a national vote, and polling suggests that the vast majority of Canadians would reject the idea outright. Even if Canada wanted to join, the U.S. Congress would also have to approve the move. This would trigger a long and heated political debate over the legal, economic, and military implications. Adding Canada as a state, or multiple states, would dramatically shift the balance of power in Washington, something neither party would take lightly. There's also the issue of Canada's provinces. Canada isn't a single unified entity. It's made up of 10 provinces and 3 territories, each with its own government. Convincing all of them to agree to U.S. statehood would be nearly impossible, as some regions are already fighting for more independence, not less. If Trump tried to force the issue through economic pressure instead, the results would likely backfire. Cutting off trade or imposing tariffs wouldn't bring Canada to the table. It would just push the country to strengthen ties with Europe and Asia. Canada has vast natural resources, including oil, minerals, and agriculture, making it a valuable trade partner worldwide. If tensions escalated, Canada could look to other global powers to reduce its reliance on the U.S. economy. The international backlash would also be severe, with allies like the UK and European nations stepping in to support Canada's sovereignty. At the end of the day, a peaceful annexation of Canada is almost impossible. The Canadian government wouldn't agree to it, the people wouldn't vote for it, and the economic and political fallout would be too great for either country. If Trump actually wanted to make Canada part of the U.S., diplomacy wouldn't get him very far. If Trump couldn't bring Canada into the U.S. through diplomacy, the only other option would be force. But would he actually try it? And if he did, what would happen? Any attempt to annex Canada militarily would be considered an act of war. Canada is a NATO member, which means that if it were attacked, other NATO countries, including the United Kingdom, France, and Germany, would be obligated to respond. That alone makes the idea almost impossible. A U.S. invasion of Canada wouldn't just be a conflict between two countries. It could quickly escalate into a much larger global crisis. Even within the U.S., the military itself might resist such an order. The Pentagon operates independently from the White House in key areas, and an attack on Canada would go against every military alliance and strategic interest the U.S. has built for decades. Top military leaders would likely advise against it, and there's even a chance they would refuse to carry out an illegal order to invade an allied nation. On Canada's side, while its military is smaller than the U.S. military, it is well trained and equipped with advanced technology. Canada also has strong defense agreements with the U.S., meaning it would have inside knowledge of American military strategies. Defending Canada's vast and rugged terrain would also be a challenge for any invading force, making occupation extremely difficult, even if an invasion somehow succeeded. Beyond the immediate military consequences, the economic impact would be severe. A war between the U.S. and Canada would send global markets into freefall. Trade would be completely disrupted, affecting industries like energy, agriculture, and manufacturing. Sanctions would likely be imposed against the U.S., cutting it off from critical international trade partners. The dollar could lose value, inflation could skyrocket, and shortages of key supplies could become a real problem for Americans. At the end of the day, using force to take Canada wouldn't just be a bad idea. It would be catastrophic. It would likely result in a war that the U.S. could never truly win, even if it had military superiority. The fallout would affect every American, from higher prices at the grocery store to the possibility of an economic collapse. For preppers, the real concern isn't whether an invasion of Canada will happen. It's what happens if tensions between the two countries escalate. Even if Trump never follows through on these ideas, the fact that he's openly talking about annexing Canada should raise some concerns. While a full-scale military invasion is unlikely, rising tensions between the U.S. and Canada could still have serious consequences, especially for supply chains, trade, and overall economic stability. If relations between the two countries start to deteriorate, one of the first things to expect is trade disruptions. The U.S. and Canada have one of the largest trade partnerships in the world, exchanging billions of dollars in goods every year. If that relationship breaks down, the effects would be felt immediately. Fuel prices could rise if oil imports from Canada are cut off. Lumber and building materials could become more expensive, affecting construction and home prices. Food supply chains could also be impacted, leading to shortages or higher prices on Canadian products. Travel restrictions could be another consequence. If the U.S. starts imposing economic or political pressure on Canada, border crossings might become more difficult. That could affect both Americans and Canadians who travel or work across the border, limiting movement and creating further strain on the economy. For preppers who have considered Canada as part of their bug-out plans, that option could become much less reliable if tensions continue to grow. Then there's the possibility of military escalation, even if an actual war never happens. Both nations could increase military preparedness along the border. That could lead to more surveillance, heavier border security, and increased government scrutiny of cross-border movement. Any sign of a growing conflict could also cause financial instability, affecting jobs, investments, and the overall economy. For preppers, the key takeaway is that even political rhetoric can have real-world consequences. Even if Trump never takes action, just the threat of annexation could create instability, making it harder to rely on Canada as a trade partner, travel destination, or bug-out location. The best approach is to stay informed, keep an eye on how this situation develops, and be prepared for possible disruptions in supply chains, energy, and the economy. This situation may never turn into a full-scale crisis, but if the past few years have taught us anything, it's that the unexpected can happen fast. The real question is, are you ready for it? Trump's comments about Canada becoming part of the U.S. might sound extreme, but they raise serious questions about where U.S.-Canada relations could be headed. While a diplomatic annexation is nearly impossible and a military invasion would be a global disaster, even the idea of pushing Canada in this direction could lead to economic and political instability. For preppers, the focus isn't just on whether this will happen. It's on what kind of ripple effects it could cause. If tensions escalate, supply chains could be disrupted, trade agreements could shift, and travel between the two countries could become more complicated. Any significant strain between the U.S. and Canada would have real-world consequences for anyone relying on imports, fuel, or even cross-border movement as part of their long-term preparedness plans. The bottom line is this: whether Trump is serious or just making bold political statements, it's worth paying attention. Political tensions can escalate quickly, and economic uncertainty follows close behind. That's why staying informed and having a strong preparedness plan in place is always a good idea. What do you think? Could Trump actually try to annex Canada? Or is this just another distraction? Let us know in the comments. And if you found this video useful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out the links in the video description for more proper-focused news and updates. That's all for today. Stay prepared, stay aware, and we'll see you in the next one.